AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Hello, welcome to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. In today's show, we're speaking with Dr. Gero Decker, co-founder and CEO of Signavio. Welcome to the show, Dr. Gero.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark.
So for those who don't necessarily know much about Signavio, can you tell us a little bit about what led you to found the company, and then tell us a little bit more about what the company does and how it relates to AI?
Sure. I was always very intrigued by how companies work, right? You see what they do on the outside, the products and services, but rarely you get a view of how they work on the inside. I was really intrigued by that, worked as a consultant, and had also worked at a university to do academic research around business process improvement. But one thing that really struck me back then was that while some companies were very successful applying business process management, others failed completely with their initiatives. And I asked myself, what's that defining factor to be good or to be bad at managing your processes and improving as a business? And it turned out that the one defining factor was how inclusive, how much engagement you could drive among your employees and your stakeholders in this game. So if you only have two experts who know that they know exactly how the company needs to run and it just needs to be multiplied out, you will most likely fail. But if you have a collaborative approach where you bring dozens, hundreds, or sometimes even thousands of people together so that they can share their ideas and can talk about the different options that they have going forward, how to run the business, that this vastly improves the situation. So being a technologist, an engineer at heart, I thought about, what kind of technology can we provide to facilitate this? So with my dear co-founders, we started to build a collaboration tool around business process design to bring people together to ideate around how a company should be run going forward, and then bring that to life. So this is what started Signavio 11 years ago, but obviously the company has evolved quite a bit since, not just serving as a tool for business process design, but really having become an end-to-end technology provider for business process management. And today we serve almost 2,000 mid-sized and large companies around the world on their journey of transformation in business process management. How that all relates to AI? Well, we touch AI, or AI touches us, in two different ways. One is one of the components that we have in our product leverages process mining technology, which means that we can take data from enterprise applications that you have in use, typically gigabytes, terabytes of data that you ingest, and you reverse engineer the processes. You reverse engineer how the company works, what's working well, what's not working well, where you have your bottlenecks, where things are going wrong, so that you have very fast insights into what you can do better. And that vast amount of data obviously can be used very, very nicely also for AI techniques to enhance that time to insight, the question of how fast you can get to those insights of how you can improve. And the other way how AI relates to what we do is that by thinking about changing your processes within a company, you often take the perspective of asking, how can we best leverage technology inside of our business? So imagine you are a dairy producer, right? Coming from, the green grasses to the cows, to the milk and ice cream that you produce. The question this company has, like any other, is how can we leverage technology and advanced technology like AI best for our business? And what we help do there is really look at, what are the opportunities that this technology brings, and what kind of processes, what part of your operations can be reinvented, can be improved by the use of that technology. So not only do we use AI for ourselves within our own products, but we also help these thousands of customers out there make smart choices about where technology should be applied.
Tell us a little bit about process mining and how does it differ to data mining? And then what is the role of process mining in configuring and implementing more effective AI?
Yeah, so process mining is often seen as a sub-discipline of data science, right? So it takes data and you have certain sets of algorithms to learn and to drive insights from that and then eventually drive action from it. The specificity about process mining is that it always takes a process angle to things, right? It always assumes or looks at data as a chain of things that happen, but that are somehow related. So think about, an order to delivery process, right? That starts with a sales order that comes in from a customer, all of the different steps that need to be done internally. For example, you need to produce something, or you take it from stock, or something else needs to happen. All the way that it gets to the customer in one go or in multiple goes, and you write an invoice and you get your money. And there might be a claim that something is not working, and so on and so forth, right? So this would be a chain of activities that have something to do with each other. By taking a process perspective, you chain these things together and then compare, how are you working? And as not only you have one order, but you might have thousands or millions or billions of orders, it then becomes really interesting to sift through the data from the perspective of saying, when are we particularly successful? When are things running particularly well? What are the influencing factors? What can we do to get to a great outcome? So this is what process mining looks at, and basically takes these event logs as an input, sifts through it, gives you an automatic discovery of the actual process behavior. It can give you a so-called conformance check, where you can compare the current reality to a should be, right? How you assume it is. But you can also drive predictions in the sense of what is likely going to happen next based on the last 5,000 cases or 50,000 cases that we've seen. What do we assume is going to happen next? So this all happens under the umbrella of process mining. How can you make that effective, or what is required to best do that? Obviously, data is required to do that, right? Having access to that, but also being able to stitch these things together, right? And make sense of the logical dependencies that you have. You can do that through, pre-configured connectors. You can do that through heuristics to see what are the things that belong together. But oftentimes you also need a lot of domain knowledge to be able to say, oh, here's a sales order and here's an invoice. Those two things belong together.
So you had mentioned at the start of the show that you're dealing with over 2,000 companies going on their journey. So there's a lot of learns there as well. Can you tell us a little bit about why businesses need to be more efficient before applying AI practices? So that maybe you can share some examples that are working with your clients, and maybe some examples of where things haven't gone to plan, but through iteration, things have improved.
Sure. I mean, the one thing that's really fascinating in the last 5 to 10 years is that technology and the love for technology spans far beyond the traditional technologist functions and departments within the business, right? Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, you would have had technology discussions with the IT teams, right? Those people really proficient about the technologies. What has really changed is that people, they carry technology with them every day in their pocket, right? They know what is possible. They use apps, they use smart devices. They're surrounded by technology every day. So this spurs imagination, and people are really fascinated by the thought that technology, and in AI in particular, could do a lot more and could take over a lot of things that a human does today. One big problem, or one big challenge that we've seen in early projects was that people too readily jump at thinking about the solution, right? They have a particular situation, something that's happening, and they think about the solution immediately without realizing or without asking themselves the question, are we really architecting things here in the right way? Are we really building towards the right thing? And what often goes unnoticed is that you have a ton of variability, a ton of things going wrong, a lot of different ways how to treat things that are fine as long as humans are doing it. But the moment you let technology do it, you want to have simplified and understood and managed things much better, because in the end, the technology is much more stupid than a human that can adopt much more readily. So long story short, instead of just taking a simple task and applying, take a decision task, right, and applying AI to it, the companies that are really successful, they take a step back. They think about what's the end-to-end chain that with a problem that we want to solve. And maybe that decision that you just thought about automating doesn't need to be made at all in that process, or it could improve vastly through additional inputs that you could collect somewhere else along the process chain, for instance, or you can act much smarter to the insights that you generate. So long story short, taking that end-to-end approach, looking at the process, really from start to finish, is really the defining key success factor to make technology work and beneficial for a company.
So it's having that holistic approach from the start and being very planned out about what you want this journey to look like. When you're working with different types of customers, there's going to be some areas that will maybe jump out, some similarities. Any areas of data mining that companies often overlook, where in hindsight, it's not that they're not paying attention, it's probably just that they're not aware of these kind of gaps?
Well, so oftentimes the solutions are come really from unexpected angles, right? So oftentimes there are these decisions or these steps, these activities that go completely unnoticed somewhere, right? For example, I don't know, you're producing credit cards, right? And you have this one employee who has been working there for 25 years, and she is just so good at spotting inconsistencies or things that can potentially go wrong and fix it beforehand. Now, suddenly you introduce more technology and you want to, reroute things. And that sanity check or that control that you had in the process before by that smart lady with a ton of knowledge suddenly is gone or has a different role within that process, right? And you wonder why things are now going wrong, right? And you have a lot more errors, a lot more problems. And what helps really is to take a step back and understand what are really the activities end to end that go in there. Have we forgotten about anything important, right? What happens when? And then you can make that smart choice. And you can see that in all industry verticals. You can see that, obviously in production, in manufacturing, there's the biggest tradition or maturity around making things repeatable, right? And ironing out error, and having full control over things. In other domains, like for example, financial services, people thought for a long time, well, we're not moving physical goods, so this has nothing to do with manufacturing. It's just about, smart things, plugging together. But then you find that you have the same types of problems that people were fighting with in manufacturing in the 60s and 70s, of all kinds of variation and things going wrong and wasteful activities and people not talking to each other, leading to all kinds of problems, that you have the same patterns of problems happening everywhere, right? So that's really fascinating for us because in all domains, in all industry verticals, now with the advent of technology, you have to be a lot smarter, you have to have a lot more transparency, and in the end, you have to manage things a lot better than you could by just relying on smart people, getting it to work somehow.
So we could have probably 10 different podcasts on data management. It's such an interesting topic, and the world we're living in now, things have changed so much. Tell us how COVID-19 has caused companies to change the way they manage their data, and are they choosing to integrate AI for data management?
Well, so the one thing that COVID has shown is that digital cannot be stopped, right? it was pretty clear that every company needs to set itself on a digital path already pre-COVID, but how hard it has hit, how fundamentally it has shaken up customer interactions, but also how companies work internally, was really, that was a big surprise to everybody. So all of these digital programs wanting to become more digital that already existed before, but that had a timeline of 3, 5, 7 years. Suddenly people started wondering, well, can we maybe compress that to a couple of months or even weeks? Or what are the things that we can do even in a single day, right? So it spurred people's imagination, what can be done. So some things, really happened overnight. And with all of those customer touch points, for example, switching to digital, also the amount of data that you're collecting has gone through the roof through that. Right, and this is what companies are obviously harnessing now, and wanting to do more. Plus, people who were afraid before that, technology could replace my job or could reduce the need for what I'm doing. This perception has also changed quite a bit because, people realize that by using more technology, if you do it in a smart way, you can also build more resilience into your operations at the same time. Right, so also the mindset or the perception of technology and AI and other things have also vastly improved in the broad masses, which is great, that people are more open to explore those avenues going forward as well.
It's truly incredible to see the rise of digital transformation from a nice to have, and then after COVID, to it's happening. It's truly incredible. What trends do you expect to see in 2021 for AI? And do you believe that we'll see a continued rise of automation in AI?
Well, so yeah, I mean, AI is slowly becoming mainstream, right? So a couple of years ago, you had these interesting to look at examples where there's a robotics company here, there is natural language processing there, there's a cool app over there. I think what everybody has woken up to is that AI potentially can influence everything, but it's not that easy to make it work right out of the gate. You might have certain applications that work pretty much plug and play, or with minimal, retraining or repurposing, right? So for example, I'm thinking about automatic response to help desk emails, right? If you have a service that does that for e-commerce companies, they will respond to questions like, I ordered this package 2 days ago, it still is not here, I'm really angry now. You can build a service specifically for that domain, and with minimal retraining, with a couple of days of effort, you can transport it from one company to the next. And then you have these highly complicated, highly individualized scenarios where applying AI really is a custom endeavor for you and your scenario. You see that more and more platforms, the big enterprise software platforms, they all come with AI capabilities now. Think of an Infor or a Salesforce or an SAP that give you a toolbox to apply that at scale. But there again, it comes obviously with the additional effort to make it work for your specific scenario. And the moment it becomes a little bit more tricky, a little bit more effort to really make it happen, it becomes even more important to understand the process case behind it, right? What outcome are we really trying to improve? And are you seeing the results? Are you really capturing that value that you intended to capture? This becomes then even more critical in these types of scenarios.
I'm Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus, and you've been listening to the AI in Action podcast. Our guest today has been Dr. Gero Decker, co-founder and CEO of Signavio. You can follow us at Alldus AI in Action on www.alldus.com/podcast. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another AI in Action podcast episode. Thank you for listening.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.